Stories of superheroes and Superman give us an ideal to strive towards as we too embody the capacity to save the day. This is Skull Babylon, and you're about to listen to a special Father's Day edition of Paradigm Shift Radio, in which we welcome on my very own father to talk about Man of Steel, the new Superman movie, covering a variety of aspects to explore how a character like Superman helps us see more of who we are and how a movie like this can be seen as a catalyst for conscious expansion and greater inspiration. Consciousness is in an ongoing process of helping itself become more aware of the fact that there is a superhero within all of us. Be a part of that transformation for yourself and join us again for future episodes at facebook.com/paradigmshiftradio. Enjoy the show. In the lore of superheroes, heroes and villains battle daily for control over the fate of the universe. In real life, our battles are on a smaller scale. But the truth is that the triumphant hero resides in all of us, pregnant with true power and ready to react with precision, grace, compassion, and confidence. All we need to do is by becoming present, conscious of ourselves and our feelings. The consequences will be to confront the unknown and then gain the ability to draw power from the wisdom of uncertainty. This is not an intellectual exercise or the start of deconstructive psychological process. In fact, it can be accomplished in a very few simple steps. That's just one of the ideas that we're going to be talking about on the show tonight. And you're tuned into another episode of Paradigm Shift Radio, and I'm your host, Skull Babylon. And, of course, happy Father's Day to everybody out there, everybody who is a father themselves, everybody who has a father of their own. And, guys, let's just get the word out there as the show continues to get rolling. Obviously, we are broadcasting at a different time tonight. It is Sunday at 8 p.m. EST, and normally we do this show on Saturdays at 11, and it will be that in the future. But it wasn't last night just because I had some stuff going on and real life sort of took priority. But here we are anyways, and despite the fact that we may not have as huge of an audience as we would normally, we're still going to put as much effort into this show to make sure that it is engaging, inspiring, educational, insightful for you guys to listen. Now, hold on one second. I just got to open up the window in here. The studio is awfully hot, and there's a rainstorm going outside, and it's a really interesting day out right now. So, for those of you who may not have heard about Paradigm Shift Radio before and maybe tuning in for the first time, Paradigm Shift Radio is a branch of ParadigmShiftCentral.com, and Paradigm Shift Central is a global network for Paradigm Shift communities all across the world that are bringing consciousness into their local communities, into local conversation circles, as well as Facebook groups. So if you haven't heard of that, check that out. Also go to facebook.com/ParadigmShiftCentral. And Paradigm Shift Radio, like I said, is a branch of that. It's a show that we do live every Saturday, and it will be live again next Saturday. And I actually got some really cool news as to what to be able to expect in the coming week, and some of you already might have seen the information about this in terms of our next guest. So shout out to everybody who is awake and aware with us in the live chat right now. So we literally have about 8 people in the live chat, but still, that's awesome, guys. We'll definitely get a good show out of this, I promise. And tonight's show, in theme with Father's Day to a degree, we're going to be talking about Superman, and in particular that's because my father is actually in the studio with us today, and I'll be bringing him on in the next couple minutes. And we actually went and we saw the new Man of Steel movie tonight, and I think the Superman mythos is just so rich. It's so full of symbolism as to how we can understand more about ourselves, more about morality and what it means to be human. So we're going to be getting into that, into symbolism within the Superman movie, the new one, as well as the Superman mythos, and kind of expanding upon the theme of superheroes in general. And from there, we'll be opening it up into open discussion. So if anybody feels like calling in at some point in the show, please feel free to do so. And guys, let me know, can you hear the rain outside the window? Because I'm probably not going to close the window, so it's just going to be a little bit of ambient backdrop for this episode, so don't mind it at all. But in terms of new news, I'd just like to give you guys off the bases. Obviously, if you haven't checked out my personal YouTube page, please do, because there's new videos going up there all the time. That's youtube.com/SkullBabylon. And in particular, pretty sure you probably heard that thunder right there. In particular, last night I put up a video of what I was doing in place of the radio show episode, and it was some street poetry. And that was part of a festival that was going on, and so first and foremost, cross your fingers, guys. Let's hope that the storm outside keeps us on the air, and I got a good feeling about it either way. But anyways, check out the new video on my channel, and it's me doing poetry, and I'll link it into the YouTube version of this episode once it is up and online. And that was like consciousness expanding poetry, me sort of planting some seeds out in culture, and that's something that I encourage you to do, to be able to express yourself in confidence and be able to bring new ideas into your local community in a whole multitude of ways, to be able to step up and be that superhero and be that representation of love and just, you know, whatever it is that you choose to represent. So that's just one thing. And then in addition to that, I got to mention to you guys, following up on last week's episode with the director from NEURONS to NIRVANA, Oliver Huckenhall, we have to give a huge round of applause, because this is pretty awesome news, and the fact is that they succeeded in reaching their funding goal. So huge congratulations and huge thunderclap outside. The gods are clapping along with us right now for this one. So NEURONS to NIRVANA did reach their funding goal, and I think that's a really awesome fact that we as a community can pull together once again to be able to support the projects that we want to see brought into this world. And of course, go back to episode 50 and check that out, and go to facebook.com/NEURONS to NIRVANA to check that out. And feel free to continue to donate, because if you do donate, you will be able to get access to the movie in the first place. So that's another thing. And yeah, other than that, GoFundMe.com/Journey to Lucidity. If you guys haven't heard of that, that's the full-length movie that I have online that will be officially being put out there very soon. So stay tuned for that, and that's going to be like a huge, exciting announcement once we really pass through that door. In addition to that, before we move into the actual conversation here, last thing on the agenda is in terms of what is going to be happening next week on Paradigm Shift Radio. And this is actually really big news, because in the past, you know that on Paradigm Shift Radio, we've had quite a few of, wow, there's a huge storm outside. Now I got to close my window because water's coming through. Wow, this is something. All right. This adds a whole extra element. Can you close that window? Jeez. Anyways, what I was going to say, next week.
It's good. Your room will get washed.
Oh. Yeah, my dad said this rain coming in through the window will clean my room for a chance. So, but anyways, so big news in terms of what's happening next week on Paradigm Shift Radio. Next week on Paradigm Shift Radio, we will be having on the man himself, Immortal Technique. He is a hip-hop conscious artist. If you haven't heard him yet, check out his stuff. Just YouTube Immortal Technique. He's been around for quite a while. And for those of you who are familiar with his work, you'll know that this is actually like really, really cool to have him on. I mean, he's kind of a big name. A lot of people know him. He's like been around and everything. And I was in contact with a buddy of his, and you know, we just sort of said, let's work together, let's create something out of this. So that's going to be happening next week. But the thing is, because he's in the UK, the show next week, listen very carefully, the show next week will be broadcasting at 8 p.m. EST on Saturday. So normally it's at 11 p.m. EST on Saturday, because we want to be able to get him on at his prime, and we don't want to have to bring him on at 4 a.m. in the morning. We're going to be bringing him on at our time, my time, which is 8 p.m. EST, and around midnight his time. So stay tuned for that in YouTube Immortal Technique. And yeah, maybe if you guys have some questions for him, start thinking about those ahead of time, and just message us through the Facebook page, and we'll be able to coordinate that. So again, guys, as we are about to get ready into the conversation here about Superman and the themes and the symbolism behind it, please just continue to put the show out there. Right now, our show has boosted in users in the live chat. We are now up to 11 users in the live chat. So shout out to everybody in the live chat. Normally, we usually have around like 30-ish. So, but still, like I said, the fact that we only have a few listeners doesn't really mean much in terms of how we're going to be able to carry the show, because people are still going to be listening to it afterwards, and we want to make sure that we do as best as we can. We want to be able to make sure that we prevail. And oh, I don't know if you can hear, I got another guest on the show. My dog's like barking because of the thunder now. So
that's Super Dog.
Super Dog. All right. So with that said, guys, let me introduce to you the special guest who we have here in the studio with us, and that is my father, like myself being Brendon, a.k.a. Skull Babylon. This is the man who is the one of the terms I came up with recently was co-producer of who I am. I mean, in terms of, you know, if you could really sort of boil it down to that. So my father himself, would you like me to use your real name, or?
By all means, go ahead.
Okay, so his real name's Paul, obviously, or you can call him like Skull Daddy or something. That just sounds really weird, but
don't even.
So anyways, all right, guys. So just confirm with me because we're sharing a microphone right here, and I'm just gonna get the conversation rolling, and we're just kind of leaning into it. But I want to make sure that you guys can hear it okay. But we both do have really booming radio voices, and if you're wondering where I got it from, this is the guy. He's been involved in TV and media stuff, kind of growing up, and I was kind of around a lot of that, and you know, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, and it's really it's really exciting for me to be able to invite my dad here onto the radio show, especially since it is Father's Day, and I think it's really synchronistic. And the fact that we got to go see Superman this afternoon, it was my second time seeing it, and his first time seeing it. So let's just sort of jump right into it. Paul, would you like to introduce yourself, or do you want to just get right into the thoughts of...
Well, the first thing I want to do is I want to make a public statement.
Go for it.
You know, there's a real correlation here, actually, between the story of Superman and the story of myself as the progenitor of Brendon as a son. And as we all know, Superman was sent to Earth by his father to save the world, and he came from somewhere else. And I don't know if Brendon will ever save the world, but he definitely came from somewhere else. And rather than Krypton, the Salvation Army just left him one day at our front door, and, well, the rest is history, so... I really don't know who his father is. We just found him.
The myth continues to evolve. Actually, it's really funny. When I was talking to my mom about why I was excited about the new Superman movie, I was just saying to her, you know, like, oh, there's a lot of paradigm shifty themes within it. Like, I like the idea that there's like this whole other planet of people who are like humans. I mean, in the sense that, you know, they look like us, they sound like us, but they have evolved spiritually and technologically in their own ways, like eons ahead of where we are currently. And the idea that there is, in my mind, there would be this possibility of life existing on other parts of the galaxy where humans are kind of like the natural form for consciousness to experience itself from. And then when I was explaining this to my mom, I was like, yeah, you know, like this idea that there's these other planets and there's like these other humans on them. And then she's like, oh yeah, maybe that's where you came from. And I was just like, you said it, not me. So anyway, so Paul, having seen Superman this afternoon, I mean, what were your immediate thoughts on it? I mean, obviously we were both very impressed. We were very, very, very impressed with what it accomplished. So what do you think?
Well, I thought, first of all, I have to say straight as a person that loves this film and has watched different versions of Superman over the years, for my money, this is the best version of Superman that I have ever seen. When I was a kid, I read the comic books, grew up with the DC comic books in the 1960s, and I saw the first Superman movie in 1978. I'm sitting here looking, and I realized, going, holy cow, it was 35 years ago. But in its time, the original Superman was an excellent movie, and it followed more closely to the original theme of the comic book hero Superman, and technology-wise, in the time, it was a very, very good movie. But I have to say, watching Man of Steel today with Christopher Nolan and Zack Snyder, they've just done a fantastic job. Mm-hmm. You know, like it's an interesting from the perspective that he seems almost to be a character that's been reconfigured more in terms of modern reality than as a comic book hero, and the CGI is just unbelievable. I mean, it's almost seamless. You sit there watching yourself, and the willing suspension of disbelief has gone completely. Is there anybody out there that's actually seen this movie so far?
Anybody who's in the live chat, feel free to just mention whether or not you guys have seen it and just your initial thoughts on it. But, I mean, yeah, for me personally, part of the reason why I was so excited about this rendition of Superman, because, I mean, to be honest, like, I like Superman, the last movie that was done in 2006, which was supposed to be a reboot in itself, but, you know, the success just didn't really follow it. I never really got too excited about that, never really went to see it in theaters, but this one, because Zack Snyder was directing it, that was a huge thing for me. So, I mean, I love talking about movies and film and just how art itself, how movies itself are a way for consciousness to communicate to itself. You know, this idea that, like, through the artist, we sort of, like, the artist acts as a conduit for a message to come through, and sometimes they're not always aware of it, but sometimes they are, and then when the message is conveyed to the viewer, it's this message of teaching us about ourselves. It's the reflective lens. And I think Zack Snyder is an excellent person to do the Superman mythos because he is quite conscious. And I just say that just when you look at some of the other work he's done. I mean, the previous film that he did to Man of Steel was the Watchmen movie. And I mean, that is a huge, huge undertaking in itself. A lot of people said that there was no way that could be made into a movie, and I think that was incredibly well accomplished. So I mean, for Zack Snyder, like, he says it himself, like, he says that within this movie it's a chance for us to learn more about what it means to be human through the interaction of the Superman character this time around. And there were some changes made into the plot. I think they were all very well done. They were very intelligently chosen. So some of them, I mean, there were some minor. I mean, I'm just thinking back to like the original Superman story. I'm not even totally versed in it, whereas my father would be versed in it. But I mean, you know, in terms of the symbolism that sort of came through to you, Paul, what caught your attention in terms of the symbolism? Because I mean, state the obvious. There's always the comparison between Superman and Christ, and that's something that isn't shied away from in this film. So.
The comparison between Superman and the Christ-like figure seems to have been is definitely something that comes up all the time, and it goes back to the origins of the character. And in the movie versions, it was introduced at the time. I mean, there's a real obviousness to it. Basically, an only son being sent to the planet to save the world, to take care of the people out of there. You always have that, and it's interesting in this one because as I was watching the movie this afternoon, I was taking notes of kind of like and drawing parallels between the story of Christ and the story of the Superman that we're seeing, and there was a number of things there that just jumped out at me. They even had really one scene in the church. Yeah. Where Superman was talking to a priest, and he was. When you watch the movie, there's a part when the protagonist, the character Zod, General Zod, comes, and he basically says to the Earth, he says, "Turn Superman over to me, or I'm going to destroy the world." So now Superman has this moral dilemma of whether or not he needs to sacrifice him to save mankind. So I automatically have that. And there's one really interesting scene where he's actually in a church and he's talking to a priest, and in the background you see a stained glass window of Christ, the agony of Christ in the Garden of Gethsemane in the night before he is crucified, where he is praying to God, asking if this cup shall pass him over. And again, you see the same type of theme being played out right in the movie with this in the background. So the symbolism is very heavy. And actually, if you read any of the reviews about it, the directors say that they didn't shy away from it at all. I mean, they put it right in for people to see and found their own way of telling it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's what makes this movie very, very grounded, very realistic. There's, you know, and we'll just kind of say I'm trying not to really give spoilers here, so but be mindful if you're listening to this. There may be some element of surprise slightly taken away if you haven't seen the film yet. But I mean, I sort of want to give a recap on the general plot that happened. And so let me just do that real quick. So in this particular story, in this telling of Superman, you have and this is kind of going back to the general story of Superman, but let's just sort of cover the basis so we can really kind of build upon it there. Superman's parents, his father, Jor-El, he is the leading scientist on Krypton. And his wife and him decide to have a child who is not born out of genetic modification. It is the first natural birth in Krypton, in numerous centuries. So even that in itself instantly makes Superman unique. And that's something that actually wasn't totally in the original telling of Superman. And then Jor-El, he understands that the Krypton planet itself is coming to an end because they've been harvesting the core. And then I want to say villain in this, but it's interesting, and this is something we can talk about. The character of General Zod, he is not your traditional villain. He himself, he is one of the Kryptonians who has been genetically bred for a specific purpose, and he is genetically bred to be a general, a war general, and his mission is to preserve the life of the Krypton race. And he recognizes that like the current people running Krypton aren't really doing the job, and then some conflict occurs. Anyways, long story short, Krypton is about to explode, and Jor-El sends Kal-El, who is Superman, up into the stars and into this planet of Earth, where they recognize that they're a semi-intelligent species, but through sending him out there, it creates the hope that the Krypton race will live on through Superman, because they actually encode within him the genetic DNA of like the entire Kryptonian race, which is like this really interesting thing, because there's like this one part and there's like a skull, and the skull is encoded with the entire race of a civilization. And obviously when you see that, you sort of think about the idea of like crystal skulls and whether or not where like how they could be also carriers of information as well. So anyways, Kal-El, Superman, arrives on Earth, gets picked up by his family, who is these human parents in Kansas, and then later on he grows up, and then General Zod is arriving on Earth in search of Superman, because he wants to be able to get the genetic code from Superman to be able to repopulate the Kryptonian civilization on Earth by terraforming the planet. So that's really the basis of the plot. But one thing that, it just sort of just to direct this conversation, I think, what is it about Superman that makes him super? And to me, it's boiling it down to the idea of it's his humanity. It's the fact that he's not just Kryptonian. He was raised in just a very like loving home, and he's taught about like morality and compassion. And then he's put in this situation where he has an unlimited supply of power behind him, the power to destroy, the power to defend, and the power to create. And then he is left with this choice within himself of like which direction he chooses to go in. How does he choose to use it? And yeah, like I think again, just like what is it that makes Superman super, Paul, in your opinion?
Well, definitely the point about his humanity, because he's a character that traditionally has had a strong moral compass, and you see that in all the movies, and that is one of his main factors here in this movie, is that he is a grounded individual who also at the same time, it's interesting because he has to make a moral choice, because at heart he is a Kryptonian, although in the nature nurture type of thing he is brought up in Earth, and outside of his body he is a citizen of Earth. So when Zod comes and he meets and he challenges Kal-El, and he wants to take back the genetic code to repopulate it. The Superman is now faced with a moral dilemma, whether to be true to his place of origin and help the people from his planet, or to protect the people of Earth. And so he's given that decision, which I won't tell anybody, because then we're giving away the plot.
No spoilers there. Yeah.
But one of the things I'd like to say is I almost found Zod to be a tragic figure in this. And although he is definitely not your classic criminal, he's not your Lex Luthor type that wants to blow up the world. He has in his own way his own strong moral compass, where he is the perfect soldier and a protector of his planet. And it goes back to the old thing that good and evil are a matter of perception. To Zod, Kal-El is evil because he does not choose his own people, whereas Zod, that the moral choice for him is to do anything to maintain the continuity of the race, even if that happens to be genocide. Which in history we've always found that everything is justified, and there has been times when in civilization and colonization between races, the new race coming in commits genocide under the premise of the extension and expansion of continuation of their own civilization.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's always interesting to sort of like look at the comparison between like the colonial and the Indians, and sort of just how you sort of see a similar thing there. Just in themes of like the idea of what Superman sort of like represents as a symbol, especially in this day and age, there's a lot of very potent themes, and being on Paradigm Shift Radio, I think it's easy to sort of look at Superman as this like symbol for specifically like higher consciousness. And what does that mean? Like higher consciousness means like the embodiment of more virtues, and even the idea of being able to have more control over one's environment, and being able to have being able to not be afraid of fear, being able to understand that like uncertainty is a natural element within an experience, and to not bring fear into it. I mean, Superman is a very, very fearless character, and there's a lot of there's some quotes within the film that Superman's father says, and they're actually like quite literal about it, where he says, he says to Kal-El, he says, like, you will give these humans an ideal to strive towards, and in time they will join you in the sun. So, I mean, even like the idea of, if you're looking at like esoteric symbolism, like the idea of like join you in the sun, what does that mean? Like joining you in the sun refers to that connection of ourselves to that godness, that oneness. So, I mean, that's where you like get this idea of like, what was Jesus? Jesus was sort of like this this step between ourselves as like everyday humans and this godly potential that is within all of us. Because I think that's kind of what I get out of the Jesus teachings, was this idea that Jesus wasn't trying to say, hey, look, I'm some super special guy. He's trying to say like, hey, look, I'm capable of doing these things, and so are you. And I think that's where like, what Jor-El was saying, like Superman is an ideal to strive towards, and that's something that is very true with the superhero mythos in all genres, where kids see that and they see the roles that these characters play, and they're like, wow, like I want to be Superman, I want to be like this Spider-Man or whoever it is, because it's a very challenging role, but at the same time, like the roles that they go through are macro representations of the micro decisions that happen within our lives on a daily basis. Paul, did you have anything just to add? I'm just kind of going over some notes here. So.
Well, one of the things I was wondering about in this, when we talk about Superman attaining some kind of a godlike status, is that to ask the question, was he enlightened? Was there anything about his character or about him that was enlightened, that placed him at a place above anybody else in the human race? And I think that's where his humanity comes through, because I think I see the moral compass, but at this point of the development and the reboot of the franchise, I don't see enlightenment in him as an individual. He has yet to reach that point. Mm-hmm. Although his father has offered him enlightenment of what he could be, I think in terms of his spiritual development, he has not reached that point yet. He's just aware that it's somewhere down the road.
Yeah. I mean, within this movie, he's very fresh to this role of wearing the suit, if you want to think of it that way. Because I mean, even both of his fathers say that his human father, who is played by Kevin Costner, he says, and this is where again these potent messages come through. He without being able to quote him directly off the top of my head, but he says, each of us has some sort of role to play, some sort of meaning within this existence, and we can spend and some people will spend their entire lives figuring out what that purpose is. So I think that's something where a film like this has the potential for the audience to sort of reflect upon the idea of, what is my purpose? Like, what can I do to change the world? Because again, Kevin Costner's character, his father, he says to him, like, you can choose to be a good man, or you can choose to be a bad man. But regardless of what choice you make, you will change the world. So again, do you want to change the world for the good, or do you want to change the world for the bad? And Superman is obviously like this hyperbole representation of a situation where we ourselves are constantly sort of in that constant struggle, and think of it as like balancing the ego or whatever. But ideally we want to be able to bring more good into this world, but in order to do that, it takes a conscious choice. It takes a conscious effort to step into the embodiment of this role. I mean, being like conscious is not something that will just well, I mean, that's kind of a debate in itself, like, can it just sort of like happen by default, or is our mind like so conflicted that it actually does take like effort to be able to pull back the layers of the ego before we can get to that humanity that is good within nature? Because I think within the film they talk about that, how it might have been Kevin Costner's or it might have been Jor-El, but both of them were saying that he believes that like within each human there is the potential for good, and there is I think it was his Kryptonian father Jor-El who was saying that. He says within each of these humans there is the potential for good, but they maybe haven't fully seen it, they haven't fully actualized it yet. So again, Superman is kind of like, almost think of it as like the metaphor for the wolf, or if you want to think of it that way, he's treading new path. He is that leadership role where others will see where he goes and create their own path in similar directions. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff within this movie. And obviously, I mean, some stuff like right off the bat that has been throughout the Superman mythos for a while, is the idea that like Superman is 33 years old. And for those of you who are kind of familiar with some numerology symbolism, 33 is a very, very potent number, in particular in terms of, you see it in Freemasonry, 33 degree, and what it kind of goes back to, and obviously state the obvious, Jesus was 33, that's like part of it, but even then, like the fact that Jesus was 33 was a symbol in itself, because for me at least, one way that I can interpret it is the idea that 33 represents like the 33 vertebrae going up the spine, and it correlates to the idea of, think of it as like the serpent knowledge or the kundalini rising up from the root chakra into the crown chakra, going up all the 33. So it takes Superman 33 years to like step into this embodiment, in the same way that it took Christ 33 steps before he was like that fully embodied version of himself. And just a couple other tidbits here, and then I'm just going to throw it off to Paul again. Some other things that are really interesting, because when you think about the symbolism between Superman and characters in other movies that play out this solar hero, the hero's journey, one easy one is to think of is Neo from the Matrix. It's a very similar story. There's also this element of sacrifice that takes place, and this huge role of being the one who can save, the one who has the potential that others don't quite just yet. And the thing that was interesting that caught my eye is the fact that the character of Morpheus in The Matrix, who is played by Lawrence Fishburne, is also within this movie, is also within Superman. And that was just something that was interesting, and I don't think that was by accident. I'm sure Zack Snyder specifically casted him there just because there's like a subconscious sort of correlation that the audience's brain will put together. And then the other thing was that there was actually another character from The Matrix, minor character, and some of you may not be too familiar, but in the second and third Matrix, the general who was in control of Zion, who was like going around in a mech suit and fighting off all of the robots and stuff, like if you guys know who I'm talking about, he is in Superman as well, and he actually plays a general as well. So I mean, just the idea that like he was kind of this moderator between Zod and Superman and the savior of the human species, and that's kind of very similar parallels between that and his role at being the protector of Zion in the Matrix. So again, just other symbolisms there. Paul, did you have anything? Just kind of, I mean, you got lots of notes in front of you. So.
Well, it's just kind of like
so much.
It's things that there's just so many layers in this movie. It's just a matter of where do you want to go with this. We, like I said, we've already had the Christ-like figure, but the other things that I couldn't but help notice is just the statement that was being made by the characters of Clark and the Kents, his parents in the movie, and how they tried to get him to suppress his true character, to hide his powers, because they knew their son was different, and basically they feared that he would be persecuted for being different. Mm-hmm. And I mean, if you look at the things that are playing out in today's society, where we generally have a feel of other people, of other cultures, people with different lifestyles, people with different degrees of sexuality, that are being different from the rest of mainstream society. And when we find out about that, quite often they react violently. So there's this natural impulse of the Kents to protect their son, because even though no matter how invulnerable he was, and no matter how wonderful his powers were, they still felt, because he was different, that he would be persecuted by people who feared
the
him
unknown,
based on the fact that he was different.
Yeah, and like there's one scene, and this isn't really a spoiler, but there's one scene where Superman, as a young boy, saves these kids in a bus. Like, you see it in the trailer, and then just a quick scene after that, one of the kids' parents, his mother, comes up to their parents and he said, like, what Clark did was an act of God. Like, this was providence, and that's where his father was trying to, like, protect. He felt that the world wasn't ready, like, because Superman in itself, like, answered this question as to, like, whether or not we were alone in the universe, and it would just change the way that we would think about reality. And kind of, if you guys saw, I did put up a video when I first saw the movie of me kind of rollerblading home, and it was really shoddy, I admit that, because it was like 1 a.m. and I was tired. But one of the things I was just kind of referring to is this idea that maybe a movie like this is actually consciousness planting the seed for itself to open up to the idea that aliens could exist, and they may be something kind of similar to what the Superman like franchise is projecting, that they may be very humanoid-like. And not to really totally go off in that direction, we can save it maybe for the after hangout or another conversation. But some of you might have seen that there was like the Defense Minister of Canada who was talking about how they've had like ET contact with numerous races, and like you probably didn't hear about this.
Peter MacKay.
Not Peter MacKay. No, like another defense guy.
Oh, remember this? Okay, not Peter.
Yeah, not Peter MacKay. Shout out to Peter MacKay. But he was openly talking about like how the government had like contact with like other like humanoid alien intelligences and stuff like that. So again, this film like this might just be subconsciously sort of prepping us for it. Another thing that I brought up in the short review that I had was the idea that like Superman's S in this movie is portrayed differently, and I think it's really cool because the S that he has on his chest is not just like a logo, but rather it's a crest. It's a crest that is associated with a family, a house, and in this case it is the House of El. And even the word El in itself kind of roots back to, I think, maybe Sanskrit or something, or Hebrew, but it means like angel or God or of the heavens kind of thing. And the S in this, Kal-El explains to Superman, he says that the S represents hope. It is a symbol of hope. And that what catches my attention is that the S also looks very similar to, it fits in nicely with the yin-yang, in the sense that it sort of starts at the top and kind of goes through and comes across the bottom. And also in this one, the S in this particular Superman looks a lot like a serpent. Like if you look at it, the head of it looks exactly like a serpent. So again, this film is sort of nudging us to sort of remember this idea of like serpent knowledge and what does that mean. That's where you're sort of getting into a lot of like esoteric themes, but generally the idea that we are more capable than we realize, but again, it's like kind of like tapping into these dormant abilities within ourselves. And that was just kind of something that caught my attention. Now I do have a caller who I would like to bring onto the air, and it's actually a buddy of mine, Lane, and we were having some conversation, and there were a few really good points that I know he had, and I've sort of been saving off on them because I'd like him to be able to reiterate it. Before we do that, Paul, did you have anything else that you just sort of wanted to mention in terms of like, why a movie like this has such potential within this modern day culture? Maybe why is this movie so popular?
I think I just like it as a fresh reboot of the Superman series, and it's like everything else. It's a matter of perception. You're going to read into it what from where you're coming from. So all the someone that goes and watches may see it completely different from the way that we've seen it. But I'll tell you one thing: you watch this movie, and there's definitely a lot of food for thought in there. I guess if I was to make a comparison, that when I was watching this and we're talking about it as a reboot, I would say it's very similar in the way as the difference between the original Star Trek series, the original Star Trek movies that came out of the series, and the recent reboot of the last two Star Trek films. You went from the original ones were a little bit cartoonish, more swashbuckling type characters, and the other ones seem to be more grounded in reality, and I think that's the same perspective as what they were doing here. The good part about it is that in the way that they've done it, they've given themselves lots of room to make sequels to that to follow this 2, 3, maybe even as many as 4 movies.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, it'll be really interesting based on the success of this film to see where they take the franchise. A couple other things I just wanted to mention real quick that caught my attention in the film. And again, like, you know, every single shot in this film was very intentionally put together. There's one shot where it shows Clark as a kid and he's getting picked on by some bullies, but he's holding a book, and the book is actually a philosophy book about the teachings of Plato. And I just thought that was really interesting because when you think about Plato's allegory of the cave, that's what, like, the Matrix movie was all about. This idea that reality is not as cut and dry as it appears to be, and also just identity of the self, like gnose ipsum, know thyself, and you know you see that in the Matrix movie as well. So, you know, you sort of get these little planted seeds here and there. And there's some really just other excellent quotes that came up. Just the idea of taking that leap of faith. That was a conversation that came up when he was talking to the priest. You know, those moments where and he was talking to him about like trusting his gut and following his intuition. So again, these are things that through the movie they're kind of reminding us to be like, oh yeah, you know, like intuition. What's that again? Like, how do I connect with that? Or, you know, like taking those leaps of faith and embodying virtues and being strong in the face of fear. So a lot of really cool and empowering themes. Like, this film is a very empowering movie, and obviously the whole theme with flying just kind of, for me, I'm just like, yeah, I really want to be able to bring that into my dream practice, into my dream space, so I can practice flying around in the astral and be able to do some more Superman stuff. I think that's always a fun idea to sort of pursue. So, Paul, I'm just going to get you to, can you put on these headphones, even just one? And we're just going to set this up. So we're going to bring on my buddy Lane. So do you hear that? Yep. Okay. So Lane, I see you in the queue right now. We're going to bring you onto the air. And to state the obvious, you're going to be talking with both myself and my father, Paul, here. But I'm sure you got some points to sort of talk off on the top of your head. So Lane, you've been on Paradigm Shift Radio before, and I'm happy to bring you back. So this is my good buddy Lane from London, Ontario, as part of Paradigm Shift London. So Lane, if you're ready, I'm going to bring you onto the air. Here we go.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now. It's nice and loud.
Oh,
hello. Hello, Lane. Cool. So,
Yeah.
Lane, I mean, I'm sure you've got some stuff that you want to talk about, because we had a nice conversation in the park, and I know you're a super huge like comic book fan to begin with. So, what do you have to say, sort of just about the Superman theme in general? Like, what is it that makes Superman super?
Wow, I think that was probably one of the biggest questions that you asked when we had that conversation, and that's one of the biggest things that keep drawing me back to Superman. It's not necessarily, the flight or the strength or the heat vision or the spandex, but when you're talking about somebody like Superman, he's sort of the spearhead of modern mythology, and one of the greatest things I think about the archetype is that so many people can see a reflection of themselves. Like you said, no matter where you're coming from in the world, everybody can relate to Superman in some sense. I mean, we've already talked about how there's parallels with the concept of the Savior, or even his name, El, it means of God. You mentioned, but I think we have mentioned this previously, and I think this is the most important point. I kind of want to bring it back to how the human element is key in this film, and I think that is again what makes Superman super. I mean, obviously, physically, or with his unnatural abilities, he epitomizes all our hopes and our dreams and he's the embodiment of our limitless potential, right? And this is where we get into talking about stuff about higher consciousness and attaining the godliness to have the ability to shape your reality. And Superman has all these qualities that we aspire to and that we admire. But I thought it was interesting. He's almost like he's almost the antithesis for me of the human condition, because when you look at humanity, you have all these, if you want to be cynical about it, you have all these corrupt, imperfect beings unconsciously sort of struggling for godhood. We all want to gain power, we all want to gain control and those kind of abilities, right? But with Superman, you almost have the complete inverse of that, where he is a god with all those abilities, but he's struggling for his humanity, and then that's, I think, the biggest thing is you see that throughout the whole film, where he does become human. And it's interesting that they show him as imperfect, and they show him, like you said, reading Plato, for example, who's one of the pillars of modern Western thought. And it's interesting, like everything there was put in intentionally, like the image next to Jesus and the Plato book. It's interesting that you mentioned, being able to do Superman type things in your dream state or in the astral plane, because it was, I believe, Plato who initially had the idea of the world of forms, right, which is the idea that everything that is created in the physical world first begins as an idea, right? Mm-hmm. So again, that's back to the idea that we are creating our own reality. And I think with a movie like this, it really can bring to light, the fact that, obviously we're not all running around in spandex with utility belts and stuff, but it can bring us to a deeper level and say that we do have the ability to create our own reality and then forge our own destiny. I think that's the greatest thing.
Yeah,
like the potential of this movie.
Yeah, when we were having that conversation, the key word that you used was compassion. That is what made him human, like his empathy and his ability to relate. And one thing that when you were comparing him to Jesus, I really liked what you were talking about. How like the idea that Jesus, being the super person that he was, like in theory, he had the ability to like manifest things at will, and that's where you get the stories of changing water into wine and creating loaves of bread and fish for the people. And then as you were explaining to me, you get this story of Jesus where he puts himself through the desert and he is like starving and everything. In that situation, Jesus had the potential to like will himself to eat, like he could have like manifested food in front of him and solved that problem, but instead he like put himself through that trial to be able to like grow out of it in the same way we as a human would grow out of it.
Well, I think that's one of the greatest parallels is you get the godlike figure that comes and grows into humanity. But the story of the temptation in the desert is basically, he says, like, if you're really the Son of God, at any time you could end the suffering, at any time you could turn these stones into bread. But obviously Jesus kind of, advocated for, in my opinion anyway, rising above those sort of animal instincts and those base desires. And you see that a lot with Superman in this film. Obviously he's not perfect, but when he's fighting with those kids, and
you
he
saw
takes
the movie,
the high road. When he's in that bar and he takes the high road with against that guy, obviously like he smashes his car, and that shows that he isn't perfect, that he is human, but he still nonetheless kind of takes the high road there. And I think that's, and if you look at the title of the movie too, I think that's what it's saying. When you look at the title, the title of the movie isn't Superman, right? The title of the movie is Man of Steel.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's about his ability to take bullets. I think it's more about his resolve, right? And it's his resolve that's steel. If he can stand up to those provocations and still kind of rise above it, and be an example and lead as an example, and not lower himself to the level of humanity.
Yeah.
So to speak.
Yeah. Yeah, like I agree, and I'm just going to throw it off the Paul here 1 second, but you're right, like that there's a scene in the movie where he's in a bar and a guy like throws beer in his face, and in a situation like that, a lot of us as humans, regular humans, could relate into that situation, because you just first instinct would just be like, like punch that guy out, get into a brawl, and but again, like you said, Man of Steel, to be able to conquer our ego, our animalistic nature, that impulse that so commonly and so easily drives us, and to instead be like, like there's another choice here. There's a choice that I can make consciously, and that one doesn't have to be a violent one, but rather one that's like more intelligently decided upon, more consciously decided upon. So, but yeah, sorry, going back to the idea of like, I think the temptation in the desert. Paul, did you have something to mention on that?
Well, actually, I wanted to. You do have the temptation in the desert, but since we're drawing the parallels here, and we're talking about his humanity and all the insecurities that Superman had, but the one ultimate humanity of a being, of a higher being, is to be like us, is to lay down one's life, and that was Christ's ultimate humanity, and that was to choose to die. And I think in the film Man of Steel, although Superman does not die, he does choose to lay his life on the line and to sacrifice his mortality for the greater good.
Yeah, Lane, do you have anything you want to throw in?
Well, I just think one of the biggest, I would agree completely with what your father said. I think one of the biggest things he sacrifices too is you see at the end of the movie, like I think Paul, you mentioned it earlier, where he had to make that choice between the old world and the new. And one of the terms that came up when me and Brendon were having the discussion was Superman really is the ultimate immigrant, right? And you saw, the actor did a really good job. You saw the pain in his face when he had to choose between Krypton.
Spoilers.
And right.
Yeah.
And you talked about this whole time about how he became human, right? And I think
that's a new element that was injected into this character.
Right? Sorry, go ahead, Paul.
No, I was going to say, and actually that's a new twist into the Superman and story, because in the original story, the planet Krypton is doomed, and he is just sent to Earth, and that it. And so there's no decision for him to make except for the decision his parents make. But this is a new thing that is part of the relaunching of the Superman character. The Superman story is that he is given this moral choice to choose between Earth and resurrecting the Kryptonic race.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like I think one of the big themes in this movie was what his father was saying, is that what makes Superman so important is because he represents like that ability to make that choice for oneself. So rather than society telling what a child will become, instead like giving them that free will to be able to decide who it is that they will make themselves into. And I think that's like a very potent message in itself. And Lane, I'm just kind of looking over some other notes here. Do you got some stuff off the top of your head?
Yeah. Well, just off of the top of what you just said right there about the ability to make the choice. And it's always interesting to me when you look at some of the biggest names in popular culture, the stories that we've heard for centuries and millennia and whatnot, how somebody will take that we've heard so many times and still be able to make something new out of it. And the biggest thing, which you of course already mentioned, was the idea of the first natural birth on Krypton in however many years, which again sort of rings a little bit of Jesus in me with the inverse of the Immaculate Conception. Sort of, it's almost the exact opposite. But in terms of making a choice, it was like that because when you look at Zod, or when you look at any of the genetically born Kryptonians, they were all following a program. They really had no choice, right? Zod says, I'm programmed to do this. It's not within my will to go against nature's program, per se. And I think that's one of the things that separates humanity from animals, more so than anything, is we do have free will and we do have choice. But of course, what we do with it is nerve-wracking sometimes. But anyway, but I think that's one of the coolest things about Superman, is about making the choice, because he wasn't programmed, and he almost had to make his own program, and I think that was sort of, his program was almost becoming human.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's one of the things I noticed, Lane, was that the notion of free will came up several times in the film, because it was Superman's natural birth. As his father said, it gave him the ability to choose his life. He was not genetic engineered to be predisposed to be a soldier or a politician or a doctor or something. His father created him so that he can make that choice to be the person that he chose to be. And that also comes up with his father on Earth with Kevin Costner, where although, there's that one time where he's being bullied by the bullies, and he chooses not to do it, but he says to his dad, I really wanted to smack that guy. And then his father says, well, what would that have accomplished? So, there was reasoning in it, but in the end, it was Clark who made that choice, not to retaliate. So again, he had free will.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Jor-El specifically says, and I'm just kind of looking at my notes here, kind of just reiterating, but he says, each of us has the ability to aspire to be something greater, and Superman is an embodiment of that belief. Like that's what he is. Like he is that symbol of hope, the House of El. And for the same way that we can decide who it is that who we are going to be, who we are going to become, and what service we are going to provide this world with. Be it, is it going to be good or bad? Regardless of what it is, it will change the world, and that's something that we have to always keep in mind. So we have to be very, very, very frivolous and very conscious of our actions and how they're creating the reality around us. And kind of taking this even just like a step higher in terms of like paradigm shifty stuff, and kind of like looking at like this bigger picture. One idea that's sort of like personally within my repertoire of potential ways as to how things actually happen, it's this idea that like between incarnations, opening up to the idea that like this body is a vehicle, and then like the consciousness exists like beyond life and beyond what we recognize as death. When we are in that state of between life, we actually have a choice to like choose where it is on earth that we want to go to, and whose parents that we want to, like, who do we want to incarnate with, like what body are we going to create for ourselves, and like we actually choose our parents, which is a very interesting thing. And in the same way that we can choose our parents, we can also map out this potential life that we have in front of us. And in past episodes, we've kind of talked about this idea of like that would be referred to as your dharma. That is your life path. That is like the golden self. So I mean, Superman can be thought of as like he is that person like walking that same path of the golden self. But I think it's just really cool when you sort of like think about the idea that there's a very real element within this reality towards the idea that each one of us was sent here for a reason, but we were the ones who sent ourselves here. I mean, you could think of like our Father as being higher consciousness itself, like the all-knowing awareness that is the Godhead, whatever you want to call it. And then like we are the son of that consciousness who is sent here through those like choices to like be some sort of embodiment within this reality to change it. And I mean, even just for myself, using myself as an example, like my purpose, and this is something that I like chose and created for myself and I resonated with, has been what is an extension of what we are doing right now, like this whole like paradigm shift thing. And I think like that's something that is still evolving within my identity. It's still something that I'm like stepping into, but it's something that I recognize is creating change and will continue to create change. So if I can create change, how will other people create change? How will they continue to get involved with their communities and their realities? And how will they be the superhero for the people in their life? And being a superhero doesn't mean that you have to like fly around, kind of like what we were talking about already, Lane. Like being a superhero can be just the idea of taking full responsibility for everything that you do, and just acting out of your heart to be able to like help people and have that compassion and have that empathy, and to just bring consciousness into every step, and again to be able to like let go of fear, sort of thing, in the process. And that's where you get these ideas of like courage and confidence. And like Superman, he's a really confident guy, and there's no reason to think that we can't be equally as confident when we sort of open up to the idea that like each experience that we go through is just helping us become stronger for who we can become. And Jor-El, Superman's father, he says that to himself. He says like here on Earth, because of the sun, it's a new sun, and this is part of the mythology, like it affects Superman's abilities, so he's like able to have all super abilities on Earth. And he says I don't know how powerful you can become. Like the only way to know how powerful you are capable of becoming is to continue to test yourself. And that's something that we have to do every single moment, every single day, as much as we can, is to continue to acknowledge these opportunities to test ourselves. And that can be something as super simple as like not eating that cookie that's in front of you. Elaine, like going back to our discussion Friday, like it takes a superhero to not eat that cookie, because just in the idea that that's a micro example of just being able to take responsibility and be able to choose paths that are more aligned with your higher purpose, if you want to think about it that way. So Lane, do you have a thought on that? Or I mean, I can pass the mic around here.
Or
go ahead,
even just not making the easy choice. I think one of the best things that I enjoyed about this depiction of Superman, like
a lot of hard choices.
And strong. He's confident and he's strong and he's powerful, sure. But I think one of my favorite depictions was you saw in many cases that he was for lack of a better word, he was meek and he was prone to suffering, right? And when you're talking about, being on the path or towards this golden self, I think in a lot of cases, pain is what makes that progress or starts the process of evolution. And, we like to think of superheroes as like rich people, I bet you never have to suffer. You can just fly to Tibet. I bet you never have to, deal with things. But we saw that Superman was very prone to suffering, and that was part of what made him stronger and made him push his limits, and he didn't choose the easy way out. So pain, in a lot of sense, maybe similar to the Jesus sacrifice, pain was progress.
Yeah. Paul, did you have...
Actually, it's interesting. I was just taking a look here at kind of like the development of the character of Superman from the earliest days. For those of you who don't know, the character of Superman actually goes back to the 1930s when it was developed, created by two high school students in Cleveland, Ohio, by the name of Joe Shuster and Jerry Siegel. And I think it was Joe Shuster, who was from Toronto. And, and even in those days, the character as he was developed throughout the years was always used as a statement on social issues of the time. Mm-hmm. And in those days, it was just things like corrupt politicians and gangsters, and then over the years, I think Superman in the 1970s, there was actually ecological issues, and today, with the current version of Superman, you get sociological issues being injected into it. So one of the interesting things is the character is always updated and given the current issues to deal with of whatever society has on the go at the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Lane, you're still on the air. I was just temporarily muting your mic. There's just a little bit of static coming through, and I'll bring you back on in just a second. There's a lot of themes within Superman, and there's some that theoretically I could have mentioned them off the top of the show, but even just the comparison as to how Superman is a modern day representation of Greek mythology, and a lot of the ideas that what we see within our modern day comic book superheroes is very similar to the stories and the myths created in the past by Greek culture and even Hindi culture, when you think about these characters and how they themselves are supposed to be representations of us and the different conflicts that we face internally, psychologically, and externally as well. But even just the idea that Superman by depiction looks like a Greek god. He has that look to him, just the broad shoulders and the chiseled chin and stuff like that. So I think that's just always an interesting story. The fact that we as humans are always creating these myths for ourselves to be inspired by, for us to be able to learn more about ourselves and our nature, and just to sort of create that image of what we want to be, sort of thing. So yeah, and aspire towards. I have a book that I picked up the other day, and it's called The 7 Spiritual Laws of Superheroes, and it's by Deepak Chopra. A lot of people are familiar with him. I'm trying to find some interesting quotes to sort of go to sort of read from, and maybe I'll pull some in the next couple of minutes. But I'll just sort of pull one here, and it's just talking about law number 2, which is the law of transformation. It says, transformation is the true nature of every being and of the universe itself. Superheroes are able to recognize this transformational selves as all the various forces at work within them, and to perceive the world from an infinite number of perspectives. In doing so, superheroes never face a conflict or adversary they are intimidated by or unable to empathize with. There's just there's a lot of interesting stuff here. Lane, do you have something that you want to add? Because I think we do have another caller who I can bring onto the air here. So Lane, if go ahead though. But I would like to be able to just sort of migrate into a couple other callers, and we still got it's 9:06 right now, so we still got plenty of time. But go ahead, Lane.
I've pretty much said my piece. I just think that Superman or any character, you can pick any character archetype, but I think they can be sources of inspiration. And I think that at the end of watching this movie, but even as part of the mythos and part of the culture, I think Superman represents a higher standard that we can put the social issues of the day up against, like a grindstone, and mythology and stories and all that is part of the way or the process that we slowly refine ourselves to maybe become, superhuman, for lack of a better word. But let's just say conscious, or let's just say better than ourselves, because I think we're always our own worst enemy, and I thought that was also true in the Superman movie. So I think it can teach us how to be better and how to reach our full potential. With or without spandex, with or without capes, but there's potential. So thank you for all your wisdom.
All right, thanks, Lane. I mean, Lane, I got no problem keeping you around in a bit. Actually, I think Paul, were you looking to head out? I mean,
I'm getting old, man. I gotta go to bed.
Yeah, he's my dad's got a curfew, so.
Yeah.
But anyways,
I think it.
Final thoughts if you got some. Yeah.
Good talk. It was great. It's a great topic. I mean, we can only do so many comparisons at this point, but from my end, I've said my piece on this. So, for those of you that are interested, I highly recommend watching the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely worth the price of admission. Whether or not you do it in 3D or regular film is up to you. But yeah, it's a good one.
It's a good one. All right, so there's the final review. And Paul, thank you again for helping bring me into this reality and all those other things in between. So
I'm going to another reality now.
All right, my dad's heading off into the astral. So okay, thanks, Paul. Bye. It's weird calling him Paul. I mean, normally I call him Dad. Actually, Lane, I mean, I just don't want to rank up your phone bill if this is actually doing that, because I mean, this might be technically a long distance call, but I would be more than happy to keep you around, because we do have another caller who's on the queue, and then we can get some more 3-person conversation going. So it's kind of up to you, or unless you think you can call in with Skype, I don't know. What do you think?
For a while,
for a little bit.
It's not my worst late night phone call, so.
Yeah. Oh,
yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, I had a quote here a second ago in the book. Dun 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 dun. Dang it, I lost it. Oh well, I'll have to find it again. I'm still just kind of flipping through this book, but yeah, I was just talking about tapping into the conscious awareness of all things and stuff. I mean, I could read any random thing from here, but anyways, let me continue to sort of flip through this book, and I'll pull some quotes from it as we go along. But in the meantime, caller from area code 203. This might be Jess, actually. So if this is the case, then we can bring Jess onto the air, and then we will continue to go from that. And, of course, I'll remind you guys, we can do a meditation for this episode. I'm totally down for that. And there's about 40 or 50 minutes left in this episode, and I'm not totally sure if we'll be doing an after-party hangout for this one, just because of the schedule. Some of the admins within the Paradigm Shift community, we actually got a meeting scheduled for that. So if you're an admin and you're listening to this, just a reminder that we're going to try and do a scheduled meeting at around 10-ish, and then at 11, our good buddy Roscoe is doing his show, I believe, still, and probably about the themes of what reality is and so forth. So I encourage anybody else to call into this show. Please feel free to do that. We've actually, I do have one other person, but I don't think they're looking to call in. And then we do have who I believe is Jess, looking to jump in onto the air here, so we'll go from there. So again, if anybody else would like to join in on this open conversation discussion about superheroes or anything in particular, then please feel free to call in. And right now, big shout out to the 19 users who we have in the live chat. So right on, guys, I've been enjoying the show so far, and let's keep things rolling along. So caller from area code 203, who is presumably Jess, we are going to bring you onto the air. Here we go. Hello?
Hello?
Is this Jess?
So,
okay. Well, I recognize your number now, so.
Yeah,
cool.
It took you a while, but But, yeah. Yeah. Wait, so your father mentioned something about Salvation Army and being in a basket.
That I don't think that was true. I mean, I don't really have a way to prove it, but I'm presuming it's not true. I'm pretty sure my mom is my mom, but yeah.
Well, that's nice. But yeah, when it's actually so Superman died at the end? Is that what went on there?
No, Superman didn't die.
Right.
Not in this one.
Okay.
No.
All right. Cool.
Superman
cool.
does. I mean, that's Lane. Have you read like the Death of Superman?
No.
Have you like the one where he fights Doomsday? That was actually the first like Superman comic that I remember reading was the one. It was about like the death of Superman. I still have that somewhere where he fights Doomsday, like this incredibly like stone hard guy who he just can't kill, and then yeah, that was epic. But then it turned out that he wasn't dead. He was in just like a hyper coma or something to regenerate. But anyways,
which could be maybe a microcosm for death itself. Then, like maybe we don't just die. We're all just in hyper. So we come back,
Yeah.
Wait to wake up.
Wait, Jess.
Go
ahead. Jess, did you have you haven't seen the movie obviously? Did you have anything that you wanted to? Oh, I found that quote I was looking for.
Awesome.
Okay. Should I read this quote?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I mean, there's probably lots of other stuff in this book. I know there is. I'm just trying to go across it step by step. So, again, this is from 7 Spiritual Laws of Superheroes by Deepak Chopra, and this is from Chapter 2, which is the Law of Transformation. So it says, superheroes understand that the moment they label or define themselves, they limit themselves. Consider this. What defines your experience of I am or I exist? Are not the trees, the sun, the earth, are not the air, trees, sun, and earth as vital to your existence as your heart, lungs, liver, and kidney? Could you exist in an absence of any of them? Your existence and connection to the ecosystem goes beyond eloquent words and phrases. It is a true attribute of the grand design of the universe, and more subtly, the unified field of consciousness, because the true self is the field of consciousness. Superheroes realize that, and the act of transformation is key to really tapping into and utilizing this awareness. So, I mean, that's kind of cool, because, like, when I think of that, it almost makes me think of, like, Buddha, because, like, Buddha's big thing, he talked about, like, being able to, like, liberation of suffering, and that he sees suffering within other beings and other people as like suffering within himself, because he sees like the interconnectedness of all things. And I think like that awareness is just kind of a cool thing to sort of be within the mind frame of a superhero, even someone like Superman. Like, I'm not totally sure if he really gets into that in some of the ones. But I mean, yeah, like that would totally just be like a motivation for a superhero to really do what he can to rid the world from suffering, because he recognizes that the suffering of others is the suffering of the self, of the ecosystem, of the bigger field that we are all a part of. So, yeah. What do you guys think?
Well, I have a kind of good example of that just like today. Well, I'm born on my mom's friend Adrian Nazareth's birthday, July 1st, and she is a computer programmer for Yale, and she's now in, like, Yale Hospital. Her stomach had, like, 3 leaks in it that were, like, leaking out into, like, different parts of her body. And, like, just, like, seeing her and, like, all the pain and all, like, the suffering that she's been in, like, just by, like, she's been taking a lot of anti-inflammatories for a really long time. And she obviously, didn't have, like, the best of health and the best, like, eating habits and whatnot. And she's been really, really stressed out by, like, her husband, Ray, who pretty much, like, puts her down. And, but she supplies, like, the world with everything, and her children, like, with everything that they need, sort of deal. Where it's just kind of, I've always seen, like, all these, like, little things that, like, have been somewhat outside of myself, but not, like, absolutely completely. So, like, just kind of, like, seeing exactly, like, where my health could have taken me, like, I don't know. Just, like, a long-ass story, Oops, I swore on the radio.
Okay.
But, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
nice.
That's about it.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm not totally too sure what to think about that, or how to jump that into another point about superheroes. off the top of my head. Lane, what's up on your end?
Actually, if you want to know the truth,
You're like a
I'm
crossover.
I'm on Amazon.ca right now, and I totally just bought the 7 Spiritual Laws of Superheroes.
Did you really?
Just as you're talking about that right now, I was like, I have to check that out. So I totally just plugged it in, and it's now on my Kindle. That
nice,
and Krishnamurti are my 2 recent acquisitions.
Nice.
So,
yesterday I was up at Chapters, and I picked up this book, and I picked up All-Star Superman by Grant Morrison, who is a super awesome guy in himself. Like, he talks about some really cool stuff, like magic and everything. So I'm really interested to read that rendition of Superman, because I think it sort of draws it in with a lot of like the esoteric themes and some pretty cool stuff. So, but unfortunately, I can't really talk about that yet. I haven't read it.
My ultimate favorite is Superman Red Son. That's got to be like my number 1 of all time.
Which one?
It's Superman Red Son. Is when it's like
communist
if
Superman?
If the Krypton ship fell into the Soviet Union instead of America, and how the story would be different. But it just shows for me like the object of good and evil, and it just shows like the different perspectives and how you can justify, I guess, either.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's pretty cool. Yeah, I would love to.
I would recommend it. Check that out.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think of like, I'm kind of not totally super focused right now, to be honest, and I'm kind of like looking through my book at the same time. I'm just trying to decide on like which direction you guys feel like we could take the show, because I mean there's like a lot of other like superhero stuff to talk about. I mean, outside of Superman, just like all the other characters that there are, think of guys like Green Lantern and Wonder Woman, and just with great power comes great responsibility, and all those themes. Yeah, I'd like to be able to provide something fresh-ish.
Well,
go ahead, Lane.
A little bit. You talked about this a little bit with respect to fear and the strength of will, and that's entirely the Green Lantern story, where all his power comes from will, and the only reason he can utilize the ring is because he's without fear.
Mhm.
Right, and I was gotten into a little bit with the movie.
Yeah, like the Green Lantern movie, I really liked it. I really enjoyed that movie. A lot of people gave it some weird reviews, but I sort of like caught the underlying themes of it, I guess. Yeah, just
how about the Avengers?
Well, the Avengers was interesting. More so like the Thor side of it. The Thor side of it, I was really interested in, like the idea that like Asgard existed within another dimension, kind of thing, and then it had like a lot of symbolism there, and even like the Rainbow Bridge. Which is like a whole thing in itself. That was pretty cool. So lots of Stargate technology there. But yeah. I don't know about you guys, but personally, I would be. I don't like. It's only 9:20 right now. I would be down to sort of like wrap this episode up into a 90-minute episode. I just feel that like kind of I don't want to have to like stretch things out too far if we don't have to fully have a lot of concise stuff, and we've already covered a lot of ground right now. So with that said, we could do actually like I'm just trying to think because I don't have something totally.
Right now, you need to go spin around in the phone booth and like protect the world and justice and whatnot.
Yeah.
Like, oh no, it looks like we have to end the radio show. I have to go mow my lawn and put on
That's right. It's like, oh guys, I can see the signal from my bedroom. I have to go. But yeah, I don't personally. Yeah, to be honest, like I don't personally feel like right in the mood for a meditation in this moment, because it'd be kind of cool if I had some like Superman theme music to play with it. What do you guys think in the chat? Because I'd rather get some feedback from you guys. So, I mean, I know obviously there's not a heck of a lot of people listening right now, 16 users in the chat, but are you guys okay if we just sort of like wrap up the show? Because I got some stuff, like part of the reason is I got to get ready for some other stuff. But would you guys, okay, one for meditation or two to no worries about the meditation, because we're probably, you're going to go meditate later tonight anyways, sort of thing, and then we'll just, yeah. So I'm just sort of looking for feedback kind of thing. And right now there's only like 2 people talking in the chat. Yeah, like it seems like meditation isn't totally on the agenda tonight, and that's kind of what I was feeling. And yeah, because like I mean I don't want to like fake it, so to speak. So we'll sort of go with that. All right. Let me just see, Jess or Lane, did you guys have any other points? Because I'm just going to see if I can pull like a quote from this book, and then yeah, we'll wrap this up at about the 90-minute mark into the show. So just in terms of like superheroes and.
I do actually have something if I can find it in my large, extraneous book of quotes. But if you guys could maybe like sing a jingle or something for another. Oh, here we go. I found it.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
This is a comic book. It's not. I think I've read this to you before. It's not a Superman comic. It's actually from probably the last great X-Men crossover. It's called Messiah War. But I think it's along the lines of what a lot of what we've been talking about the humanity of Superman and the humility and the compassion and the empathy that really makes him great, more so than his incredible abilities. And the quote goes like this. It's from a villain called Apocalypse, who is basically an extreme social Darwinist who just believes in survival of the fittest. But this is Apocalypse having an epiphany once after fighting the X-Men in a big epic battle. He says, "I once believed that the ability to crush one's enemies was all that was required to prove one's strength, one's worthiness. But I was wrong. There's another kind of strength, one that cannot be quantified, the strength of spirit or will. An inner force so powerful that it strips all fear, doubt, and weakness from those endowed with it, even in the face of overwhelming odds. I have seen this rare power in action and watched as those with it continue to fight, long after realizing they could not possibly survive. To refuse defeat in the fate of certain death is an act of strength so rare that I have witnessed it only a handful of times, and mine is a lifetime that spans across the ages." So I think that it really resonates with the Superman theme, and it shows, I would say the difference between a hero and a villain, and I don't think any of it has to do with spandex or capes or phone booths or quirky newspaper journalists.
Yeah, that's good. What did you pull that from, Lane?
It's from an X-Men crossover. It's called Messiah War. So it is in the realm of comic books, wrong universe, but I think it touches on a number of those incredible themes. Actually, I do have a quote from Superman too, if you want to hear it.
Go for it.
From Frank Miller's Dark Knight Returns, and it's a different incarnation of Superman. It's kind of after the age of heroes and everything is over, but it's actually Superman. He's arguing with Batman, because in this, Superman is not so much a symbol of hope, but a watchdog of the Orwellian state sort of thing. And he just talks about, and I wasn't planning this, it's just off the top of my head. And he says the argument with Batman, and it shows the different extremes, I think, of good and evil. And he says, "Bruce, you idiot, you'll ruin everything for all of us. I always knew you would. The rest of us learned to cope. The rest of us recognized the danger, the endless envy of those not blessed. But you, Bruce, with your wild obsession, they'll kill us if they can, Bruce. Every year they go smaller. Every year they hate us more. We must not remind them that giants walk the earth." And so it just shows sort of, I think that was one of my favorite Superman monologues of all time, and it shows a division between, Superman and Batman and people that we both, I think, view as heroes, but both their positions are contradictory and equally justifiable. So I think it reminds people that it's not always black and white or good and evil. Anyway, that's my thoughts on that one.
Nice. We do have another person who's called in, so I'd like to be able to bring them onto the air and just give them a chance to talk. I'm just going to pull I'm just going to read a quick excerpt here from the 7 Spiritual Laws of Superheroes. So 1 second, and then we'll bring this other caller on. Superheroes do it differently because they know they themselves to be in the state of constant transformation. They are comfortable with a world that mirrors the same. They live beyond labels. At the level of consciousness, a singular nature exists as beyond the labels we impose on it. Seeing and experiencing the world from that state of consciousness, superheroes go beyond definitions, and their inherent contradictions are able to act from a place that is absolute in terms of its utility. Their actions are beyond good or bad, divine or diabolical. Superheroes don't waste time or energy in self-righteous morality or judgment of the moral actions of others. They avoid the "I am right and you are wrong" way of thinking, which is ego-based and rooted in an ignorant and limited sense of self. They tread carefully, comfortably, and with ambiguity and contradiction, but non-judgmental of the morality of others and discerning in their own actions. True superheroes act in concert with the world around them, even what may seem like a destructive act in nature, a forest fire, for example, eventually generates fertility from which a new ecosystem can blossom. Likewise, the very best superheroes work in service to this planetary or social evolution, even if it means personal isolation or performing acts that may be deemed destructive. Grounding in the awareness and free of the judgments imposed by the self-image, superheroes can transport themselves anywhere at all times and know what is happening through the mere act of attention and intention. And then it kind of goes on from there. But yeah, I mean, that was kind of going in theme what he's saying, like superheroes being above kind of good and evil sort of thing. I mean, that's a lot of responsibility being a superhero, it's a lot of weight on the shoulders, and that's, where you get this idea of like Atlas, and that's kind of what he was about, going back to like Greek mythology and everything, obviously. So, Lane, let me just bring on the caller that we have who's waiting in the queue here. And then, we'll just kind of see where it goes. But I personally would like to wrap this up once we sort of get through this caller. And I'm happy with how the show's been so far. And I'll just remind you guys again that I don't think there totally will be an after party this time around. And we will be doing the show at 8 p.m. EST next Saturday live with Immortal Technique, which will be an awesome show in itself. So, caller from area code 409, and okay, Jess dropped, so she may be calling back, I'm not sure, but thanks for calling in, Jess. And caller from area code 409, we're going to bring you onto the air and go from there. So here we go. Hello, caller,
hey,
can you hear us? Hey, how's it going, caller? Cool,
this
caller.
Is
okay, it's Alan again. Alan, what would you like to bring to or just remind people where you're calling from, and then what would you like to bring to the show?
Yeah, I'm calling from Texas, Southeast Texas. I was just calling because, everything that I was kind of wanted to say, you guys were really hitting on here the last few minutes with your discussion about, contrasting views of what a hero really is. And I was thinking it's kind of interesting the way that we portrayed Superman, or that they've chosen to portray Superman in this sort of a Hellenistic tradition, a very Greek-centered tradition with like a solar god. But what all that tends to do is kind of the same old thing of separating the physical and the mental in a very sort of diametrically opposed equilibrium there. And I'm not sure that that's really an accurate reflection of what people really are, because the Man of Steel, that whole, you had mentioned you touched on this before, that it's called the Man of Steel, and when you talk about a physical form taking on the physical aspects of steel, that's really allegorical to intent. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really the strength of where the only point where you can unify the entire that entire dichotomy and apply it to what we are capable of. But there's something in me that resists dividing humanity into physical nature versus spiritual or emotional or mental nature, however you want to do it. It's just something that seems a little devious, something that seems a little like a dig at the physical form. And I'm not saying that the physical form is better or worse than the spiritual form. I'm just saying that it is form. Mm-hmm. And the more that we buy into the idea of superheroes instead of just heroes, like somebody mentioned Krishnamurti in here, and Krishnamurti is my idea of a superhero. Like if humility was a superpower, I think he'd be fucking God Almighty. And Krishnamurti's awesome.
Who is that? I'm personally not familiar with him.
Jiddu Krishnamurti was some little old dude that just kind of basically walked around blowing people's minds in the 60s and 70s. He was actually, they picked him up, the Theosophical Society picked him up, and they labeled him as the Christ figure. and they groomed him to be Christ, basically. And they paraded him around in the 40s and the 30s and the 40s, as like a false, as like the next Messiah. And then he just kind of was just this kid that was basically taking on the entire role. And when he hit a certain age, he was basically, I don't think it was 33, but when he got of age, he lost his brother, and he just kind of came to this enlightenment that they're right. If I am the Christ figure, then there is no Christ figure. You have to do it yourself. So he disbanded the entire organization, like gave up castles that people had given to him, dissolved the religion, and started going about lecturing people about how the ultimate power and the ultimate responsibility was in you. And until you could reach that point to realize it yourself, it was pointless to look anywhere else because you weren't really serious about it. Like him and figures like Nassim Haramein, those two are really huge heroes for me right now. If you want to talk about superheroes, those two are the guys that I see as superheroes. And as far as people who have really fully integrated the mental and the physical and the spiritual, those two really, really stand out to me. I don't have a lot of fantasies. As far as superheroes, I identify more with people like Dr. Manhattan, and maybe even the comedian a little bit, or what was the Will Smith superhero?
Hancock.
Hancock, yeah. Those are the kind of guys that I'm more identified with as far as superheroes go.
Yeah. Well, I think you bring up a really interesting topic there in itself, like in terms of what we were sort of talking about, like a superhero being like this embodiment and sort of like this balance, this internal harmony, to sort of create a list of who we can sort of see within this modern day and age as being quote unquote superheroes, just those people who have been like outstanding. And I mean, I guess you could sort of think of people like Gandhi and stuff. Like, I don't know if I would sort of have to break down as to like what it is I'm trying to label him as, or like what we're trying to actually talk about here. But I mean, I think that's cool that you can sort of like pick a few out of your own mind, like you said, Nassim Haramein. He's a super cool dude, and he's super in tune, and the fact that he's just like sharing his knowledge and changing lives, that's a superhero right there, Like for me, like my if we sort of like think of ourselves as like superheroes, like for me, like my superhero ability is like utilizing media technology, like my camera and my editing skills. Like those are like my like super abilities, among other things, as to like how I can use my talents to help like influence the world. So I mean, I think that's something that people can always think about, like what is it, what's that thing that they're particularly like good at, or something that they're really passionate about, and then just investing a little bit extra attention and intention towards that, so that they can really bring it into this world and to share that gift and contribute to the change of it. So you guys either have something, or Lane, are you still there?
I'm always here.
Lane, you're like across the room, but
oh yeah, sorry, I'm back now. I was just finding my Portugal. No big deal. Yeah, I have one more thing to share, and then I will probably bow out less than gracefully.
Okay.
But
no
I just when we're talking about ascension and becoming super, and what it takes to become superhuman and almost grow and awake to a higher consciousness, I was struck by this quote that I have by our late great former Prime Minister Pierre Elliott Trudeau. Also, I really enjoyed how in the movie, they totally threw in Fortress of Solitude on Canadian soil. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah.
Anyway,
that was cool.
He says on the subject of enlightenment and ascension and whatnot, he says, "It is man who must be changed. This will require radical means. The renewal of individuals is impossible without a revolution, simply because it means the reversal of civilization's coherent values by reconstructing our material and mental framework in every effort to produce a true elite. This could only be achieved by remaking man himself, and fulfillment through discipline, physical and mental effort, progressive morality, and the practice of ascentism." So that I think that just speaks to the personal responsibility and the potential and the ability for everybody to become what they want and create their own reality and ultimately forge their own destiny, which for me is the definition of a superhero.
Cool. Alan, if you got something, go ahead.
I got it.
Yeah, just one response to that. That comes very close to a pledge from the Hitler Human. So that's the only thing I would urge caution towards. But yeah, I totally agree, and I really appreciate taking the call. I know a little past what you had anticipated, but enjoyed the conversation.
Cool. So was there anything else that you want to add? Because I think we're probably just about ready to wrap this up here. I think if all of us are satisfied. Maybe just like a reminder to our listeners as to how to be more super in their day-to-day lives.
Just be honest with yourself. Be true.
Yeah. Lane, any message out there for our listeners?
No, I mean, I think everybody's going to take inspiration from different sources, but after watching a movie like Superman, I think it's clear that there is hope for the future, and like you said, the symbol represents hope, and I'm excited for the future for the first time in a long time, and I'm really excited to see where we go, because I think there's a lot of potential, cool. within ourselves and within the world. So
absolutely.
I'm not saying I can't see the future, but we're on the road to ascension, I guess.
Yeah, we're definitely we're climbing that ladder one rung at a time, so long as we choose to. So yeah, I think that's a good point to end off of what you're saying there, Lane, is that indeed there is hope for this world, and that's something that we will continue to carry within us. Superman wears the symbol for hope on his chest, like on his heart. So I think that's something that for us who may be more involved with these paradigm shifty discussions, and we're more sort of like aware of some of these thought patterns and ideas, we have to continue to carry these with us out into our culture and continue to inspire and continue to even just, kind of going back to the poem that I was sharing in the streets that I mentioned at the earlier in the beginning of the show, just the idea that how much we can change the world simply by bringing a smile into it, and just like simple things like that, and how they actually do create those ripples that do create waves. So yeah, so for everybody who's been listening to this show, just continue to hold hope, continue to hold space for what it is that you intend to bring into this world for the betterment of it, and the evolution of yourself as you work towards becoming that individual superhuman, that individual Superman or woman. So Alan, Lane, thank you guys very much for joining us here for another Paradigm Shift Radio episode, and I will be wrapping it up. And again, guys, no particular hangout, but if you guys do want to post a hangout, feel free to talk to each other in the live chat if you guys want to coordinate that yourself. And a reminder for the admins, we will be doing somewhat of a casual admin meeting later on tonight, so stay tuned for that. And of course, check out facebook.com/Paradigm Shift Radio and ParadigmShiftCentral.com, and tune in to Roscoe's show at blogtalkradio.com/Roscoe Wisdom, which will be going live tonight at 11 p.m. EST every Sunday usually. So be sure to check that out, and GoFundMe.com/Journey to Lucidity. Keep an eye open for that. Donate if you want to get access to the early showing of it. And next week, join us for an awesome episode, which will be at 8 p.m. EST with our guest, Immortal Technique. So once again, guys, Lane, Alan, join me in waving goodbye to the internets as we say farewell for now. So bye, internets. Bye. Okay, thanks, Lane. See ya. Okay. See you in the future, guys. Bye-bye.